Management Guidelines for Type 1 Diabetes Mellitus. Recommendations by the American Diabetes Association 2020. These again are the latest recommendations important both for pediatric clinical practice as well as theory exams. Type 1 diabetes or juvenile diabetes is one of the most common endocrinological disorders in children. But do you know? Children can have other types of diabetes as well. These are type 1 diabetes, the classical type which we shall see further in this video, pathophysiologically due to insulin deficiency. The other one is type 2 diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes, the one classically seen in adults, pathophysiologically due to insulin resistance to some extent. Third is the new onset diabetes in youth with overweight and obesity. This is a recently recognized apparent overlap between type 1 and type 2 diabetes occurring in obese adolescents, which may be understood as type 1 diabetes in the presence of an insulin-resistant phenotype. And finally, there is monogenic diabetes due to mutations in a single gene, having two classical forms, viz. Neonatal diabetes and MODY or maturity onset diabetes in the young. This is characterized by a limited ability of the body to produce insulin. So, what are the unique aspects in managing type 1 diabetes mellitus? I mean, why should we as pediatricians be able to know them separately? First, insulin sensitivity changes with physical growth and sexual maturation. Adolescents may be able to take self-care of themselves. Young children require supervision in school environments strictly. Neurological vulnerability to hypo and hyperglycemia is present in the pediatric brain, and possible adverse neurocognitive effects of diabetic ketoacidosis, which is the most dreaded complication in children. Management of this I've discussed in another video, the link of which I shall give in the description below. These recommendations have been given under various subheadings. These patients should ideally receive individualized diabetes self-management education and support, and an individualized medical nutrition therapy or a diet plan, monitoring carbohydrate intake, limiting calorie intake, while at the same time taking precautions not to compromise growth in these children. Coming on to the recommendations for exercise, which is the next most important aspect after nutrition. 60 minutes of moderate, for example, brisk walking or dancing, to vigorous, for example, running or jumping. Aerobic activity per day for at least 3 days in a week is recommended by ADA. Since exercise may cause initial transient hyperglycemia due to counter-regulatory stress hormones like adrenaline and glucagon, followed by hypoglycemia, pre-exercise glucose levels should be maintained between 90 to 50 mg per deciliter, and carbohydrates should be made accessible before these children start with exercise. These children should also be educated about strategies to prevent hypoglycemia during, after, and overnight following exercise. Some of these strategies are, for example, reducing prandial insulin for the meal preceding exercise, reducing basal insulin doses by 10 to 50%, increasing carbohydrates, eating bedtime snacks, and as well using continuous glucose monitoring. Now, diabetes distress should be screened for in these children using validated tools like PAID-T and PPAID-T. These adolescents should be given time by themselves starting from the age 12 years and beyond. Preconception counseling should be done at puberty, and this is basically applicable to Western population where teen pregnancy is rather more common. Screen for depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and learning disabilities. For glycemic control, intensive insulin regimens are recommended for treatment. Self-glucose monitoring 6 to 10 times per day should be encouraged, and this should include pre-meal, pre-bedtime, and as and when required. For example, before any exercise, before driving, or if the children develop any signs of hypoglycemia. Preferably, automated insulin delivery systems should be used to improve glycemic control. Individualize and reassess HbA1c goals. HbA1c is glycated hemoglobin. So the recommended HbA1c goals by ADA 2020 are less than 7% is considered to be appropriate. Less than 7.5% may be considered for those who cannot recognize hypoglycemia or cannot check blood glucose regularly. Values less than 8% may be considered for those with a history of hypoglycemia, limited life expectancy, or extensive comorbid conditions. And values as low as 6.5% should be considered for selected individuals if it can be achieved without significant hypoglycemia, negative impacts on well-being, or who have non-glycemic factors decreasing HbA1c, for example, lower RBC lifespan, for example, in children with congenital hemolytic anemia having developed T1DM. As far as screening for autoimmune disorders is meant, we know that autoimmune thyroid disease is the most common autoimmune disorder associated with diabetes. So, test for anti-thyroid peroxidase and anti-thyroglobulin antibodies soon after diagnosis. Perform thyroid function tests at diagnosis when the patient is clinically stable. This is done to negate the effects of sick euthyroid syndrome. And every 1 to 2 years or sooner if the patient has positive anti-thyroid antibodies, abnormal thyroid growth, or unexplained glycemic variability. As far as screening for celiac disease is concerned, IgA anti-trans tissue glutaminase should be done at diagnosis, but prior to this one needs to ensure that serum total IgA levels are in the normal range. If total IgA levels are low, then one must consider doing IgG anti-trans tissue glutaminase deaminated gliadin peptide antibodies. Repeat screening within 2 years of diagnosis and again after 5 years. Repeat screening frequently if the child is symptomatic or has a first degree relative with celiac disease. And remember to place these children on gluten-free diet if at all it is biopsy confirmed celiac disease. The recommendations for hypertension advise to measure blood pressure at every visit and aim at less than 90th percentile for age, sex, and height. If blood pressure is more than 90th percentile, start with dietary modification and increased exercise. Use ACE inhibitors or angiotensin receptor blockers if not controlled with above within 3 to 6 months. For dyslipidemia, lipid testing, ideally an LDL cholesterol, is done after initial glycemic control has been achieved and if the age of the child is more than equal to 2 years. If initial LDL is less than equal to 100 milligrams per deciliter, repeat testing is advised at 9 to 11 years of age and then every 3 years. To treat dyslipidemia, start with optimizing glycemic control and medical nutrition therapy. To first, limit calories from fat to 25 to 30% with approximately 10% calories from monosaturated fats. Second, saturated fats to less than 7%. Third, cholesterol to less than 200 milligrams per day. And fourth, avoidance of trans fat. Consider statins in those in whom medical nutrition therapy and lifestyle changes fail and whose LDL remains more than 160 mg/% after the age of 10 years. Hence, summarizing the important recommendations by the American Diabetes Association 2020 for type 1 diabetes mellitus in children, individualized medical nutrition therapy and self-management education for each child, 60 minutes of moderate to severe aerobic activity at least 3 days a week, timely psychosocial screening and counseling, individualized glycated hemoglobin goals, automated insulin delivery systems, and self-glucose monitoring, measuring blood pressure at every visit, aiming to keep it to less than equal to 90th centile, investigations done at diagnosis after blood glucose stabilization. Like we know that majority of children are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes mellitus once they have presented to us as diabetic ketoacidosis. So after the blood glucose has stabilized, perform the following investigations at baseline. These include thyroid function tests, antithyroid peroxidase, antithyroglobulin, anti-transtissue glutaminase antibodies, and non-HDL cholesterol if age is more than 2 years. Repeat thyroid function tests every 1 to 2 years or an SOS basis, celiac screening within 2 years and again after 5 years, and lipid testing at 9 to 11 years of age and then every 3 years. Thank you, and do share the knowledge.